Hi everyone, welcome back to part 2 of free cut piecing. What I love about free cut piecing is that I can piece just about anything if I can break it down into simple enough units. And although free cut piecing works great for traditional blocks, its real superpower lies in the ability to piece curves easily. And we saw that in part 1, that it's easy to piece curves if you narrow your seam allowance down closer to 1/8 of an inch, and if you adjust where you're going to start and stop sewing your seams. And I wanted to show with you a couple of early quilts I made almost 20 years ago. And I like these quilts just fine, but if you look at these flowers, you'll see that I've cut off the points of every single petal, which I hadn't intended to do. And I'll show you what the problem was. When I first started free cut piecing, I did my stack up like this, and I cut right from the edge to the other edge to get that petal shape. Of course, when I sewed them, then I chopped off all my points. So I learned how to avoid that problem with Gwen Marsden's star technique. So what I realized I had to do was do this cut all the way across, but then for the second cut to get this petal shape, I needed to start and allow seam allowance room at the top and at the bottom, at least 1/4 of an inch. It doesn't really matter so much. So today we're going to be exploring this piece. In traditional quilt making, this is called a pumpkin seed block, but it's a really good basic shape because it also could be the top of a carrot. I've done lots of carrot quilts, so I would do a carrot in 2 parts, this part later. But the top, I would piece the tops up here in these basic pumpkin seeds, or likewise in a strawberry. I would stack up a separate stack for the strawberry and the top, but do these pumpkin seeds for the top. So this is a really good and useful basic shape, and it's actually good on its own too, but we're going to explore making leaves with it too. So to get started with this, you want to stack up a stack of 4 fabrics again, preferably that coordinate with the stack that you did your previous quarter circle blocks on. And my stack is approximately 12 inches by 7 inches wide. You can work smaller, as we saw in these little guys. You can work smaller, but to get started, it might be helpful to work a little larger than those tiny guys. So if you print out your handouts, you'll see this demonstrated in there too. And I've got to be sure not to knock over my tripod here. So my first cut is going to be all the way across. Again here, the gentler your curves, the better. So that's my cut 1. And then I'm going to do cut 2. And I've left room up at the top too for a seam allowance. Now when you're cutting here, give yourself, because our seams are all going to be this way, our block's going to shrink in size this way. And you don't want to get too close to the edges here. You need to leave room for a seam allowance there too. Okay, so the other really important part about this lesson, other than getting sharp points, it's also going to teach us the order of piecing. So this was cut 1, and this was cut 2. To piece this back together, we want to go in the reverse order that we cut. So these 2 pieces get sewn together first, and then this one on later. And for this exercise, you could sew any of these other pieces on here instead. But for this exercise and our next lesson, I want you to leave the backgrounds the same. All right, so we can ignore this stack for the moment. And again here we have this curve. We're going to do just like we did with our quarter circle blocks. We're going to fit our puzzle together nicely here. And then we're going to grab this here and flip it over, get a pin in, and then ease this out in our hands so that so that I can get to that pin without any bumps or tucks. So I can see that that's about right on that end. I could do it on this other end too, but like I said, the test in all these things is when you get done sewing is, does it lie flat? Try to hold your edges together as best you can. And you can see I do use that bias a bit. I don't abuse it, but I do use it. And I'm getting down pretty close to 1/8 of an inch here on this curve. And then I get the pin out. Like I said, if you have needle down on your machine, do use it for this. So if this is your first time out, you can run to your iron and make sure that this is going to lie flat, but I know that it will. Now, something interesting happens here. And this is one of those cases where I would press toward this because we're going to be making leaves out of these pumpkin seeds. So you want to press toward, I'd want a leaf to stand up from the background, so I'd want to press the seam that way. Okay, so now normally I would go and sew all these together in the chain method, but for demonstration's sake, I want to show this. So you can see that I've got some weirdness happening here. And what I'd recommend is put these back together again and just recut there so that these match. It's easy to go, you know, basically it's that old rabbit ear problem. All right, and then to sew this other part on, we'll repeat that whole process again. So you can see I've got that much sticking out. Like I said, there's some wiggle room in here, and different fabrics behave differently. Stretchy fabrics make this whole process much easier. That's why batiks are a little harder to do this with. But you can do it. It's just a little, take a little more time to do some manipulating. And I am bending my seam allowance toward my leaf. So I want you to make all these units, and if you can, if you have the time, make some extras, because we're going to be playing with these blocks. Oh, I've lost my. We're going to be making all kinds of leaf variations from our pumpkin seeds, and you can see from this quilt. There's all kinds of variations we can be making from these simple leaf shapes, which we will explore next time. So what we learned in this lesson is how to get sharp points when you're designing, and the order of piecing. The order of piecing, the more complex your blocks become, the more important that order of piecing is, otherwise you simply can't sew your blocks back together again. And it's not really different than in traditional piecing. You have to piece certain pieces together before you can piece other pieces onto that. So anyway, try to get a bunch of leaves made, or I should say pumpkin seeds made, and then we're going to explore leaves next time. We're going to be layering our leaves on top of each other and recutting them and switching the halves, and we're going to be doing one of my favorite techniques, which is insertions. Okay, see you next time. Bye.